Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network. And welcome back, everybody. She is for me, the parenting guru if you have children that have challenges. And she coaches many parents and children as well with this all the time. Today, we're going to talk about empathy and how to build empathy in our kids. So important. And I do believe I'm far from the expert, but once you build that empathy in them, you sometimes see a change in their personality and the way they perceive things, the world, and themselves. She is Dr. Michelle Alden, and she's back with us today. How you doing?
I'm doing great. It's good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you. Good to have you back on here. Let's start with the basics. Why is it important to intentionally build empathy in our kids?
Yeah, so a lot of times parents are telling me that their kids don't care about anybody else but themselves. And a lot of kids that have had trauma or have really difficult, things that they're trying to work through, whether they're wired differently, they come across as if they don't have any empathy. And if we don't help them to build those skills, it can be kind of narcissistic or personality disorder like. As we move through our lives, we want to be more other focused, but it is part of childhood and early development to be very it's all about me. But we're talking about kids that sometimes don't move past that, and it's to extremes of where they don't really understand how anybody else is feeling about it.
That's a big one. That really is when the child, and I'm not judging. It's just been there, done that. I've seen it, that when the child thinks, oh, it's all about me. It's all about me, instead of considering the feelings of others, right?
Yeah. Well, and it's, in the hierarchy of needs, that is the top, right? When we start to really understand ourselves and be able to give to other people, that's very high level stuff. And so I think when we're looking at that as parents and we're realizing that, that takes some growth and development to be at those higher levels, even for ourselves as adults, that sometimes our expectations about what empathy is and how to build it may need some help, I guess, because having empathy for other people, I think in our family sometimes tends to be more of people pleasing, just wanting to make other people be okay with us. And it still is kind of for us. And sometimes we don't really move from that very well. And I see that a lot in families where it's not really, understanding how we feel about things and how other people might feel about things, being able to see things from different perspectives. It's more, if you're upset, then I've got to do everything to make you happy because that helps me to feel more safe.
Now, before we get into working on building empathy in our kids, if we don't do that and they grow up to be adults, what is the potential challenge there? Well,
there's a lot of selfishness, right? And it usually comes out in our relationships, and that's where a lot of times people, because of things that are happening in their relationships, that's why they are seeking counseling or help. And so as adults, our closest relationships are going to be the most affected by it. You can have empathy, and care about people at a level, even in the work that I do as, a caregiver or a counselor or a coach. But in our relationships, it takes being able to see something from a different perspective and being okay with ourselves enough that different perspective isn't threatening to us.
So take us through the journey of building empathy, and I'm guessing that it would be different for different age kids.
I look at more at levels of where people are. And so a lot of times we start with, instead of putting this emphasis on, how does that make, when I hear parents tell kids, how do you think that makes me feel? Or how do you think that makes Johnny feel when you hit him? All of that.
That's a classic. That's a classic. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I like to just deal with what is. And also I encourage parents to we're not trying to put a lot of feeling into it. We're just showing some basics, right, of how we treat each other. So using kindness and treating people with kindness rather than using words like respect or even empathy, or you don't telling kids like, how does that make them feel? Instead, one is acknowledging their feelings, like their, how they are feeling in that moment. Wow, you must have been really upset. And here's what are we going to do about that? And helping them to kind of validate their feelings and look at it themselves. Because I have found that people that don't have a lot of empathy for other people or concern or even know what to do to help people, a lot of times they don't really know how themselves very well. They don't know what they're feeling. And so the kids that I work with, they really struggle with that. It is all about them, and we want to move away from that. But at the same time, they don't really know how they're feeling. They know they're angry. They don't necessarily know why or what led to that.
If you say something like, how do you think that makes them feel? To me, it almost sounds as if your child is being blamed. Now you're putting something on them. Maybe they were responsible for something. Maybe they weren't. Either way, it sounds like it would be very counterproductive to put them in that position by using phrases like that.
Yeah, and that kind of goes back and forth, right? Well, it's like, I don't really care how he feels because he said this to me, and that's why I hit him.
Exactly.
But as you, yeah, and so as you start to help kids understand, like, in my work with parents, like helping them understand that the behaviors come from the child's like thoughts and feelings and what's going on with them, and so we address that first. Then we're also helping the parents to model that, like they're modeling, validating the kids' feelings. It's not condoning what they're doing. I mean, we still don't want them to hit, but we want to acknowledge, like, hey, I can see you were really frustrated, or your feelings got hurt, or you were embarrassed, whatever it is. When we feel that way, what else can we do? So it's helping them know what they can do in those moments, because then they're going to be so much better at helping someone else know what to do. So that takes a lot of work.
It does. Yeah. As a parent, it's very easy to say, how do you think that makes them feel? It's almost like all you're doing is repeating what your parents said to you. It's almost like let me pull that out of my subconscious and just repeat it, because it sounds like something I should be saying right now based on the situation. So take us through, and by the way, full disclosure, I'm getting texts from a friend whose son is on a basketball team, and another player slapped. You just used that. You said hit, slapped the other player when they were all shaking hands at the end of the game. So it's like this is just rampant. It happens. It's life. It is what it is.
Yeah.
Take us through that. As an example. So let's say your child hit somebody. It happens for all different reasons. And what you should say at that point, obviously, we've identified, we're not going to say, how do you think it makes them feel? But how would you navigate that situation?
First of all, we have to acknowledge when something like that happens, we're embarrassed or we're upset.
True.
Because, and we feel like I've got to do something about this, and I probably have to kind of make a big show about it so the other parents know that I'm doing something about it.
But I just want to interject. You're so good. Yes, that is exactly what a parent would be thinking. Didn't mean to jump in there, but yes, it's like you really got a handle on both sides, the whole picture.
Yeah. So, take a little bit off of ourselves, and just be like, okay, this is a hard situation. And a lot of times we're looking back on what we could have done better rather than in the moment, because in the moment, sometimes whatever's going to happen is going to happen. But just coming alongside that, and also, when something's going big and with your kids and other kids are involved and other parents, being able to remove your child just even a little bit from that situation so that you get a little bit of space, and then you can work directly with your child. And having a plan, I think, ahead of time helps a lot. That helped me a lot as a parent when I realized that I could just realize, like, oh, I'm embarrassed. I feel like I need to do something. And instead of, even putting back on my child, how do you think that makes me look? How do you think that makes me feel? Instead, it's like realizing, like, this is just a parenting moment. My child is human. It's their first experience being human. It's my first experience being a parent. So getting a little bit of space, and then I think acknowledging, what sometimes you can go for, hey, we don't hit, we're gonna take a break. And when I work with parents, sometimes we do, you hit, you sit. So it's like we're gonna take a break for a minute. You're not, and then we can kind of talk about it, because we can't really reason with them when they're in the emotional part or reactional part of their brain. So we're just taking a break. We're kind of getting things calmed down, letting them think about it for a minute. I'm not really big on pushing kids to apologize, but I do feel like sometimes they just need to know that's what we need to do right now. We're going to say sorry, and then we're going to leave. If there's anything we can do to repair it, we can, in the immediate, we can do that. Like, how do we make this right? I'm more into that than even making kids say they're sorry. But I do feel like there's just kind of a social norm. But what parents tell me is that they don't have any empathy because they never really feel sorry. And so I feel like, well, what is that about? What is the sorry? Who is that really for? And what is that about? And if we can help kids see, like, if I do something wrong, there's just some things I might need to do to repair it, regardless of how I feel about it or how I perceive somebody else feels about it. It's just making things right. So if a child breaks something, is there a way to fix it instead of putting all the feeling about it? How does that make your friend feel when you broke their toy? It's like, sometimes it's a little bit above where we are. We just need to know what to do. And I think that's so true. That's why parent coaching is so powerful, because it gives you something to do in those moments, to know what to do. That's the most unsettling feeling parents have, is when things are happening and they don't know what to do. Wow. So when you start having a plan of, like, okay, if, and you can even tell your kids if they are chronically getting into fights on the playground, when you go to the park or whatever, it's like, hey, if we have problems with the other kids, we are going to stop, and you're going to take a break, or we'll leave, so then they know, and so it's not like this big surprise.
What if your kids are a little bit older, call it middle school, and no matter what happens, they just deflect. They push it off of them. I didn't do that. Not my problem. Maybe they will admit that they did something, but it's always the other person's fault. How do you deal with a situation like that?
Oh, that's so good, because that's so true, right? And that is part of our development, right? Like we have to move from everything being, well, I did it because, and it's like we're either blaming it on the circumstance or the person. So I really think as kids get older, first of all, leading by example, using a lot of I statements, not you did this, you make me feel this way. But still validating their feelings, but not trying to solve it for them, especially in middle school. And I raised four girls, and so I'm aware of all the feelings and all the middle school drama with girls.
Yep.
And so allowing them some space too. Like they're not struggling. They're going through what's natural for them to go through. The struggle is natural. And then helping them maybe see it from a lot of different perspectives. Like not so much like how does that make other people feel, but just like, I wonder what's going on with them. I wonder why, what they're thinking, or like if like kids will show their parents a text, and it's like, oh, so how I can see that you're reading it this way, what's going on, what are you going to do about it, and giving them some room there to think of different options. Well, I'm never going to talk to him again. It's like, okay, well, that's one plan, is that really possible? What else is going on? I think if you try to just make it all about them and their feelings, like, oh, they're just having a hard time, and try to make the kids understand that, you're going to hit some real resistance, because really what they need is their feelings validated, and that they need to know that they can also come up with solutions. Well, what can we do? What's your plan? How are you going to fix it? What do you still want to be friends with these people?
Are penalties important, and do they work? For example, you hit another kid in school. Most times there's a penalty, and especially there's no tolerance. Quick side, slightly funny story. My son's great student, straight A. He's an Eagle Scout. He was in middle school, and they're in the cafeteria. And his best friend, really close kid, is right there. And they're talking. And he's like, I wonder if you could reach me. If you could hit me from there, like arm's length. I wonder if you could. And my son's like, I don't know. I think I can. And he went like this and hit him. It was just, guess what, though? They both got suspended. Because there's a zero tolerance, and it is what it is. And even though it was all explained, the school, that's the way it is. It was just for a day, whatever. And then everybody all understood what it was. But it was just in fun, like just goofing around in middle school. But penalties. Do you find that they're effective? Should we say, well, if you do that, this is going to happen?
I think that, like in the school situation, they have their policies and their protocol.
Yeah.
I feel like it's really important for parents to back that up. If you have a problem with it, you can deal with it later, but don't let your kid know that you're trying to work that out. Let the school have their policies and help your kids. Just like the rules are the rules, right? Like I might have a lot of reasons for speeding, but if I get a ticket, I probably, have to admit to myself that I deserved it,
Right.
So,
Right.
And so I feel like it's important to have those rules. That's why I like the hit, you sit thing that I teach parents. There are natural consequences that happen, and there are consequences that we can put in place. I feel like they have to be really tied to it. So if your kid is, texting people really bad stuff, cyberbullying, things like that, it makes sense to take their phone and realize they're not mature enough to have that right now.
Okay.
But if something happened at school and they're in trouble and now we're going to take their phone away and there's no tie-in, that's where I feel like it's not as effective. So in the moment, the kids I work with are very much like there's now and not now. So I like things to happen, as quickly as possible. That's one of the hardest things with like juvenile court, is that there's this huge delay, and a lot of times kids are in trouble, grounded, even at home, they can be grounded. They don't really, it's like, where's the tie-in here? I kind of like the immediate suspension, even though they weren't trying to do anything bad or wrong. It's like it was just quick and swift, and it's done. And now we're back at school. And
yep. And there was no disconnect. It's clear to the child or children, do this happens. What about if you're a parent and there's a school penalty, whatever it is, suspension, in-school suspension, whatever the penalty is, should you always align with the school? Even deep down inside, if you're a parent, maybe you don't agree with it 100%, but should you still, because it's not going to change anything. A little digression here, but I'm curious, your thoughts on that. Should you always say, that's what the school is doing and not interject your feeling? Like, I don't know. I think it's a little severe, Junior, but they're doing it. What are your thoughts?
I do think it's important. Most of the kids I work with have like an individualized plan with the school. So I really work hard at getting the parents to see the school as their team.
Yep.
And work with the school outside of their contact with the kids. I think that part of this, like everything is about me, and the selfishness also kind of comes from, like, kids are dealing with school all day long and other people and teachers and all of that. But if you're sending them to school and you've talked badly about their teacher, if you've, said that you don't agree with these things, we're not creating a safe environment then for the kids to go into. Like, why are we doing that? So
yes.
So if you really are having problems with the school and you're really against the way they're doing things, then we have to look at some other options for
but don't include
education.
Don't include your child in that, because I could see a lot of parents wanting to be, again, the delicate balance between the parent and being your child's friend or best friend, and saying, I can't believe that they imposed a suspension. That's really harsh. I don't agree with that. Taking that stance, it is what it is. You as a parent aren't going to change it. Potentially, maybe on the back end, you could work with the school and maybe change the situation, but involving your child in your thoughts of, wanting to be the ally, and we're going to fight the school together. I feel it's like you said, like that's the safe space. That is, and now you're questioning authority. You're showing the child to always question authority, which might not be the right way to go, especially for a child or a teen.
Yeah. I think that rather than like looking, as a parent, I think looking at it, we want to help our kids problem solve, not just question everything or feel unsafe everywhere they go because there's other people in charge.
Right.
Instead, we want to be able to okay, so you have this problem, even if it was like your situation where it was just, a random weird thing.
Yeah. And by the way, I was totally fine with the quote unquote penalty because that's the rule. And guess what? Lesson learned, and probably a lesson for the other students around, that if you connect with somebody, in a forceful way, and again, this was all in just goofy fun, that's what's going to happen. And that's the way it is. That's the rules.
And that creates security for everybody. We know what the rule is. We know what's going to happen if we break the rule. It's not subjective to just everybody. And
right.
It's interesting to me how much that kind of stuff is actually what helps us to build empathy and understanding for other people. Because when everything's geared towards me, well, you don't know my situation. You don't know what I was thinking. You don't know, why I did it. And everybody's trying to live that way. And, there's no understanding from anybody else's perspective, especially, I feel like a big policy like that covers a lot of people. I talk to parents a lot about, because I work with kids that have crazy behaviors that are fighting at school for real, and the parents are upset, and when the policy is enforced, but we have to work within in that, because the other parents are also upset that your child is hurting other people.
Right.
And it has to be safe for everybody. So how do we do that? And so I think it does really tie in, because part of how we help kids move through those levels is the first level is they have to feel safe. And part of feeling safe is that there's people in charge, and there's some ground rules, and we know exactly what's going to happen if those rules are broken.
Yep. Very, very delicate balance when you're in those situations, especially involving other parents. And it's a great point. They want their child to feel safe, as they do as parents, in those, more hostile situation where one kid might strike another. And same thing with bullying. There could be no violence, but it can be just words and maybe threats. And I love how you look at it from all angles, and it helps us as parents understand, how we need to do the same exact thing. Love your approach. How do we find you? Michelle, if somebody is dealing with some challenges, doesn't matter where they are, this can be all done virtually. Their children are being challenged and they are too. How does a parent connect with you?
So the best way to connect with me is to go to my website, parentingchallengingkids.com, sign up for the Get Started page and let's have a free consultation, or you can look around on the website, kind of see what I do. I have a YouTube channel, Parenting Challenging Kids. You can get to know me by the things I talk about and say, all different topics. You might even be able to find the exact question that you're looking for that way. Lots of information out there. And then, just message me or ask questions or whatever.
I don't know anybody, I have never heard of anybody that does what you do. You are a true resource and you are real. Yes. We have kids that are challenging. It's not like you're ignoring it. It's in the name of your business and also in your website. And I love that. You not to use a cliche, you keep it real. And that's what we need. We need to realize where we're at here as parents, and it's not easy. And for that, there's you. Thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, thank you.
Appreciate it. We'll be right
See you
back.
next week.
You got it.
All right.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
Let's go inside the mind of a 10-year-old.
I should have worn those earrings today. I like those earrings. Gabby has those awesome earrings. I need to ask her where she got those, but that's just what she would want me to do. I'll have Michaela ask her for me.
Buckle up, Sarah.
Yeah, but then Michaela will be like, why don't you just ask her yourself? That's just like Michaela.
Sarah, buckle up.
Michaela's such a great name. I wish I was called Michaela. There's like a dozen Sarahs in my class.
Hey, we're not hitting the road until you buckle up, honey.
Oh yeah, seatbelt. I forget sometimes because my brain is like busy, I wonder if there's pizza at school today.
Sometimes it can be tough to get through to your kids, but it's not impossible. Always make sure they're wearing their seatbelts, even on short drives. Remember, you have the keys, you have the power. Never give up until they buckle up. A message from the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council. Visit safercar.gov/kidsbuckleup for more information.